Most people think solo boating is freedom until they try docking a 40-foot boat alone with crosswinds pushing them sideways while $5 million worth of yachts are sitting 10 feet away. That's the moment the dream usually dies. Because the truth is, most boats are not designed for one person. They're designed for couples, crews, marina life, or owners with way more confidence than skill. But a few boats are different. Some are weirdly forgiving. Some almost feel like they want you to succeed. And a few are so simple and stable that beginners have crossed entire oceans on them completely alone. So in this video, we're not looking at the fastest boats, or the prettiest, or the most expensive. We're looking at boats one person can realistically handle without panic attacks, screaming matches, or needing a crew every time the wind changes direction. And by the end, one of these boats might completely change the way you think about freedom. Because the best solo boat isn't the one that impresses people at the marina. It's the one that lets you leave the marina whenever you want. And number one on this list is probably not the boat most people expect. Starting with a boat that looks tiny, until you realize why solo sailors absolutely love them. The Ranger Tug 23. Now at first glance, this thing almost looks too small to take seriously, but that's exactly why it works. Most beginners make the same mistake. They think bigger equals safer. In reality, bigger usually means heavier, slower to react, harder to dock, more stressful under pressure, and way more expensive when you hit something. And eventually, every beginner hits something. The Ranger Tug 23 removes a lot of that fear. You can see nearly every corner from the helm. You're not climbing around giant decks trying to reach lines while the boat drifts away from the dock. And most importantly, it behaves predictably. That matters more than speed, more than luxury, more than impressing strangers online. Because when you're solo, predictable is everything. One of the biggest hidden problems in solo boating is mental fatigue. Not storms, not giant waves. Decision fatigue. Every little correction drains energy. Every difficult maneuver increases stress. And after hours alone, small mistakes start becoming expensive mistakes. That's why experienced solo boaters obsess over visibility and handling instead of flashy interiors. And the Ranger Tug nails that balance. It's also trailerable, which changes everything. A lot of people fantasize about living free on the water until marina fees start hitting like a second mortgage. Being able to pull your boat out, move locations, avoid storms, or store it cheaply gives beginners flexibility most larger boats simply can't. But there is one major downside. In rough offshore conditions, small boats stop feeling adventurous very quickly. And that brings us to a boat built for people who want something calmer, heavier, and much more confidence-inspiring, the Nordic Tug 32. This is where solo boating starts feeling less like camping and more like disappearing from society on purpose. The Nordic Tug 32 has this strange reputation where owners almost never want to sell them. And once you understand the design, that makes perfect sense. Everything about this boat is trying to reduce stress. The side decks are safer. The visibility is excellent. The single diesel engine keeps systems simpler. And unlike a lot of modern yachts, it doesn't constantly feel like it's trying to punish beginners. You know what most boating videos never talk about? Fear. Real fear, not cinematic storm footage, not giant waves with dramatic music. The actual fear of being alone at night, hearing a strange sound from the engine room, and realizing there's nobody else on board to help you. That's why solo sailors become obsessed with reliability, not luxury, not speed, reliability. And the Nordic Tug became famous because people trust it. These boats aren't fast. They're not exciting in the Instagram sense, but they create something more important: confidence. You stop thinking, what if something goes wrong? And start thinking, how far could I actually go? That psychological shift is huge because once people stop fearing the boat, they start imagining a completely different life. Long coastal trips, months away from cities, living aboard full-time, quiet mornings at anchor instead of traffic jams and office lights. And honestly, That dream is probably why most people clicked on this video in the first place. But there's still a problem. A lot of trawlers feel safe until docking alone. That's where things suddenly become very physical. And the next boat might be one of the most beginner-friendly docking platforms ever made, the Cutwater 28. This boat feels like somebody designed it specifically for people who are terrified of embarrassing themselves at the marina. Seriously. One reason beginners quit boating early is because docking becomes emotionally exhausting, not technically difficult. Emotionally difficult. Everybody's watching. The wind pushes you sideways. You miss the cleat. Now your heart rate is exploding while pretending everything's under control. The Cutwater reduces that pressure massively, especially with bow and stern thrusters. Now, yes, experienced captains sometimes mock thrusters, but honestly, most solo beginners who criticize them eventually wish they had them, because solo boating isn't about proving toughness. It's about reducing avoidable stress. That's the difference between people who stay in boating and people who sell the boat 6 months later. The Cutwater also solves another hidden problem: movement speed on board. A shocking number of boats are awkward when you're alone. You leave the helm, run outside with a dock line. The boat drifts, now you sprint back inside, then outside again. It becomes chaos fast, but compact layouts with easy side access completely change that experience, especially for older owners. And that's another thing almost nobody says openly in this industry. A huge percentage of solo boat buyers are over 50, not because they're weak, actually the opposite. They finally stop caring about impressing people. They want simplicity, comfort, control, less drama, which is exactly why the next category becomes so dangerous, because this is where people start getting seduced by massive boats that look manageable, until weather proves otherwise. And some of those mistakes cost hundreds of thousands of dollars. If you're enjoying this so far, subscribe, because we're about to get into the boats that separate weekend fantasy from true solo capability. And number one completely shocked me the first time I saw somebody handling it alone in heavy wind. A lot of people think the perfect solo boat needs to be small. That's only half true. Because once you spend enough time on board, another problem appears: space. Tiny boats are exciting for about 3 days, then reality kicks in. Wet clothes everywhere, no privacy, no storage, no place to breathe mentally. And eventually, the boat starts feeling less like freedom and more like surviving inside a floating closet. That's why the next boat is so interesting: the Beneteau Swift Trawler 35. This is where solo boating starts crossing into actual liveaboard territory without becoming overwhelming to handle. And what makes this boat special isn't speed, it's forgiveness. That word matters way more than most people realize. Forgiving boats give you time to think, time to react, time to correct mistakes before they become disasters. Aggressive boats punish hesitation. Forgiving boats build confidence. The Swift Trawler 35 became incredibly popular because it somehow manages to feel larger inside than it behaves outside. That's rare. You get enough interior comfort to genuinely disappear for weeks without the boat becoming terrifying during solo maneuvers. And one thing experienced solo owners constantly mention is visibility from the helm. Not because it sounds cool, because visibility reduces stress. When you can actually see the dock, see your angles, see approaching boats, your brain stays calmer. People underestimate how exhausting adrenaline becomes over time, especially when you're alone. And solo boating changes people psychologically in strange ways. At first, everybody imagines sunsets and freedom, but after enough nights offshore, something else happens. You start becoming hyper-aware of systems, battery levels, fuel burn, engine temperatures, weather shifts, anchor drag. You realize freedom is actually responsibility. That's why experienced solo sailors stop chasing flashy boats. The more complicated the boat, the more things can fail at exactly the wrong moment. And that leads perfectly into one of the most respected solo cruising boats ever built, the Hallberg-Rassy 352. Now, this boat is completely different from the others so far. because this is where we enter the world of true offshore solo sailing. And honestly, this lifestyle is not for everybody. Movies romanticize solo sailing. The reality can become brutally uncomfortable. No sleep, cold rain, equipment failures at 3 a.m., days without seeing another person. But despite all of that, people become addicted to it because very few experiences create the same feeling of total self-reliance. And the Hallberg-Rassy developed almost legendary status for exactly that reason. These boats were built with one obsession: surviving bad conditions, not looking modern, not maximizing marina attention, survival, heavy displacement, protected cockpit, solid construction. Everything about the design says, we assume weather will eventually turn ugly. And that mentality changes how solo sailors think. Beginners usually shop emotionally. Experienced sailors shop defensively. They ask, can I trust this boat when I'm exhausted? Can I reef sails alone in rough weather? Can I recover from mistakes without panic? That's a completely different mindset. And here's something fascinating. A lot of solo sailors eventually stop caring about destination entirely. The movement itself becomes the reward. Quiet mornings offshore, the engine humming at sunrise, nobody demanding anything from you, just space, silence, control. That feeling is incredibly addictive to certain personalities, especially people burned out by modern life. But there's another side nobody likes talking about: isolation. Because solo boating sounds romantic until something genuinely goes wrong. And the next boat became famous partly because it helps reduce exactly that fear. The American Tug 365. This boat has a reputation for making owners feel safe. Not internet safe, actually safe. That's a massive difference. A lot of boats look capable in calm weather. Almost everything looks good at anchor with drone footage. But experienced solo boaters judge boats differently. How does it behave in confused seas? Can you move around safely at night? How exhausting is it after 10 hours alone? The American Tug built a loyal following because it reduces workload, and workload is everything when you're alone. People don't realize this at first, but solo boating is basically energy management. The less physical strain, the less mental overload, the fewer dangerous mistakes. That's why practical boats quietly outperform glamorous boats in real-world ownership. And honestly, this applies to life too. The things that look impressive from shore are often miserable to maintain up close. Which is probably why so many experienced boat owners eventually downsize instead of upgrading. They stop chasing image and start chasing peace. The American Tug also handles weather transitions better than many lighter boats, and weather is where solo confidence gets tested fast, because there's a huge psychological difference between "this is uncomfortable" and "I think I made a terrible mistake." Great solo boats keep you in the first category. Bad ones throw you into the second. But now we're getting into the two boats that almost redefine what solo handling can look like. One of them is probably the closest thing to a cheat code for beginners. And the other, it's the boat many experienced solo cruisers secretly wish they bought earlier. Before we get to number one, there's something important most people never realize until after they buy a boat. The dream is never destroyed all at once. It happens slowly. One stressful docking, one expensive repair, one terrifying weather forecast, one night where you barely sleep because every sound feels wrong. And eventually, the boat stops feeling like freedom. It starts feeling like responsibility without reward. That's why the final two boats matter so much, because these are the boats that make solo ownership feel sustainable, not just exciting for YouTube videos, actually sustainable. The Aspen C108. This thing almost feels unfair, because while most boats fight the water, the Aspen seems designed to cooperate with it. And the weird asymmetrical hull design that looks strange at first, that's exactly why solo owners love it. The boat runs efficiently, handles predictably, stays stable, and most importantly, it reduces drama. That word keeps showing up for a reason. Solo boating becomes exponentially harder when every maneuver feels dramatic. You don't want constant corrections. You don't want chaos and crosswinds. You don't want systems that demand nonstop attention. You want calm. And the Aspen creates a very unusual feeling for beginners. Control without intimidation. That's rare, because some boats feel capable but exhausting. Others feel easy but fragile. The Aspen somehow lands in the middle. And there's another huge advantage: fuel efficiency. A lot of people enter boating completely unprepared for operating costs. They budget for buying the boat, not living with the boat. Huge mistake. Fuel alone can quietly destroy the fantasy for new owners, especially once they realize they're not taking occasional weekend trips anymore. They're moving constantly, exploring, anchoring, cruising longer distances. That's when efficient boats suddenly become life-changing financially. And honestly, this is why simpler, solo-capable boats may become even more popular over the next decade. People are getting tired of maintaining giant floating status symbols. They want mobility, practicality, autonomy. And if you've made it this far, comment which boat you think you could actually handle alone. Not your fantasy boat, the real one you trust yourself to dock in bad weather with nobody helping, because the #1 boat on this list is interesting for a completely different reason. It doesn't look extreme, it doesn't look futuristic, it doesn't even look intimidating, but experienced solo cruisers talk about it with almost cult-like respect. The Nordhavn 40. This boat changed how a lot of people think about long-distance solo cruising, because unlike many adventure boats, the Nordhavn doesn't pretend the ocean is friendly. It prepares for the opposite. Everything feels intentional. Heavy systems, massive range, protected walkways, serious construction. This isn't a boat designed for perfect Instagram weather. This is a boat designed for people who might wake up in conditions they never planned for. And strangely enough, that's exactly why solo owners trust it. Confidence doesn't come from pretending danger doesn't exist. It comes from knowing your boat was built expecting danger. That psychological difference is enormous offshore, especially when you're alone at night and weather starts changing faster than forecasts predicted. And here's the fascinating part. A lot of people watching this video probably don't even want to cross oceans, but they still love boats like the Nordhavn. Why? Because capability itself is emotional. Humans are drawn to things that feel prepared, strong, self-sufficient. That's why people love off-road vehicles that never leave pavement, or survival gear they'll never use. Capability feels reassuring, and the Nordhavn might be the ultimate expression of that mindset in the solo boating world. But there's also a hidden truth experienced owners eventually discover. The perfect solo boat doesn't really exist. Every boat is a compromise. Small boats are easier but less comfortable. Large boats are capable but more demanding. Sailboats can cross oceans cheaply but require patience. Trawlers feel stable but can become expensive fast. So the real question isn't, what's the best solo boat? The real question is, what kind of problems are you willing to live with? Because that answer changes everything. And honestly, that's probably why solo boating becomes so addictive. It forces people to understand themselves. Some people want adventure, some want peace, some want isolation, some just want silence after decades of noise. And somewhere out there, there's probably a boat that fits that version of freedom almost perfectly, not because it's the fastest or the most luxurious, but because it lets you leave whenever you want. And for a lot of people, that's worth more than the boat itself.